You ever wonder why the biggest names, the giants of industry, just fall apart? I mean, companies that seem totally invincible, and then one day, poof, they're a shadow of their former selves. Well, today we're going to dig into this really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive idea that the very thing that makes you a massive success can actually be the seed of your own failure. All right, let's get into it. And this quote, I think, is the perfect way to kick things off. We all know the story of Icarus, right? The guy with the wax wings? But this little twist reframes the whole thing. See, the problem wasn't that his wings were bad. The problem was they worked too well. They were so good they let him fly right up to the sun and, well, you know the rest. That idea right there, that's what this is all about.
So, yeah, this isn't just some old Greek myth. It's actually a really powerful mental model for business, for leadership, you name it. It's called the Icarus Paradox, and it does a fantastic job of explaining why so many of yesterday's heroes end up as tomorrow's cautionary tales.
Okay, so here's the official breakdown. The theory, which comes from a guy named Danny Miller, basically says that companies don't usually fail because they're incompetent. Nope, they fail because they get so good at their one winning formula that they just can't stop. They double down, then triple down, and in the process they become super rigid, way too overconfident, and totally blind to what's changing around them. And that's the big question, isn't it? It just sounds wrong. How can your greatest strength possibly become your fatal weakness? It feels impossible. But let's take a look at how this actually happens out in the wild. So, Danny Miller found that this isn't just some random event. He actually identified 4 common patterns, 4, let's call them trajectories of decline. These are the paths that successful companies tend to follow as they fly a little too close to the sun. And each one starts with a really good quality, a real strength that just gets taken way, way too far. All right, first up, you've got the craftsmen. Think of these as the purists, the engineers who are just obsessed with quality, with making the absolute best, most perfect product imaginable. And that's how they get successful. Their quality is just undeniable. But here's the twist. That success can turn them into the tinkerer. They get so lost in perfecting every little screw, every line of code, that they completely lose sight of the market and forget to ask, hey, does anybody actually need this? So what happens? Well, they end up creating these technically brilliant, but ridiculously complex or expensive products. They lose touch. A classic example here is Digital Equipment Corp. You might know them as DEC. These guys made amazing mini computers, absolute workhorses. But when personal computers came along, they just laughed them off as toys. Their obsession with high-end engineering made them completely miss the PC revolution happening right under their noses. Okay, next up, the builder. These are the movers and shakers, the risk takers who build massive empires through aggressive expansion and buying up other companies. Their rise is all about growth, growth, growth. But that same drive can turn them into the imperialist. They get hooked on the thrill of expansion, and suddenly it's growth for growth's sake. They end up with this massive, sprawling, chaotic empire that's just impossible to manage. And their downfall is almost always about losing focus. They start buying up businesses and industries they have no clue about, they get swamped with debt, tangled in bureaucracy, and somewhere along the line, they completely forget what made them successful in the first place. Just think about some of those old, bloated conglomerates from back in the day, just a messy pile of companies that had nothing to do with each other. All right, our third type is the pioneer. These are the true innovators, right? The visionaries, the ones who literally invent the future. They win because they're always first with some brilliant new technology. But that success can be a trap. It can turn them into the escapist, someone who gets so addicted to chasing the next big thing that they forget to take care of the profitable core business they already have. This is the company that's constantly burning through cash on these futuristic, moonshot projects that never seem to make any money, all while their main product line is just left to wither on the vine. They're escaping the boring but necessary reality of running the business. A really tragic example of this is Wong Laboratories. I mean, these guys pioneered word processing, but they just couldn't stabilize and capitalize on it because they were always chasing the next big thing. And last but not least, we have the salesman. This company is a marketing powerhouse. They can sell anything. They win because they have an amazing brand, a killer image, and they are masters of hype. The danger? They can become the drifter. This is where the marketing is everything, and the actual product, well, it stops getting better. It becomes generic, hollow, just pure image. The downfall of the drifter is kind of a slow burn. It's insidious. They're selling you a bland, mediocre product, but with fantastic advertising. And it works for a while, until one day customers just kind of wake up and realize there's nothing there. The brand promise is empty. And of course, the textbook example here is Kodak. They were all about selling the feeling of a Kodak moment, this emotional connection. And they were so good at it, they were so focused on that brand, that they were completely blind to the actual technology of cameras shifting to digital.
Okay, let's bring all these ideas together and look at what might be the single best real-world example of the Icarus Paradox in recent memory, the absolutely spectacular fall of Nokia. Seriously, this is the textbook case.
First, we have to remember just how high Nokia was flying. Back in the early 2000s, they were untouchable, an absolute juggernaut. And their wings, their superpower, was hardware. Nobody could touch them. They were masters of manufacturing, masters of the supply chain. They built these tough, reliable, affordable phones that connected the entire planet.
And this comparison here really tells the whole story. On one side, you have Nokia's world, the world they owned. It was all about hardware durability, supply chain efficiency, manufacturing cost. That was the game, and they were the undisputed champions. But then, the iPhone shows up, and it introduces a totally new world, a new set of rules. Suddenly, it's about the software ecosystem, the user experience, an app marketplace. It was a completely different game.
And this quote is incredible. When Nokia's engineers, who were, remember, the best craftsmen on the planet when it came to phone hardware, when they looked at the very first iPhone, this was their official assessment. Think about that. They were judging the future using the rulebook of the past. Their greatest strength, their obsession with hardware perfection, was the very thing that blinded them to the software revolution. Their wings worked too well. Okay, so it's easy to look at this as just a grim cautionary tale, but it's also a really powerful lesson. The point isn't to avoid success, obviously. The point is to understand how to manage it so you don't end up being its next victim. So let's shift gears and talk about how to actually avoid this fall. So how do you actually keep from flying too close to the sun? Well, the theory lays out 3 key strategies, 3 antidotes to the paradox.
First, you've got to be willing to kill your darlings. What does that mean? It means actively trying to disrupt yourself. Ask the hard question. If a competitor wanted to destroy our business today, how would they do it? Second, diversify your board. Basically, stop living in an echo chamber. If you're a craftsman, an engineer, you absolutely need a salesman in the room to challenge you. And finally, there's the success trap audit. This is about building the recognition right into your company's DNA that your current strategy has an expiration date. What works today is not guaranteed to work tomorrow.
So I want to leave you with this final thought, to kind of turn this whole idea back on ourselves. Because this isn't just about massive corporations, right? It applies to our careers, our lives. So think about it for a second. What is your greatest strength? What's the one thing you're known for, the thing you're best at? And now ask yourself the hard question. How could that very strength, if you let it run wild, become the one thing that leads to your fall?